In this Path Exile 2 video, I want to go into a summary of details regarding the newest upcoming big major content patch update called the Third Edict, and how it plans to deal with probably every problem upsetting fans. So we're 8 months after the release of Early Access for PoE 2, and PoE 2 is set to receive its biggest update yet. We thought the Dawn of the Huntress or Dawn of the Hunt last one was really big. No, this is even going even more bigger and better and just amazing overall. This is not only adding a heap of new content in the form of Act 4, 3 temporary acts, and even a seasonal league, but also brings big changes to how the game is played. Basically, we're getting a big overhaul, guys. And this time around, GGG is looking to avoid the pitfalls of the game's initially poorly received Dawn of the Hunt update. And I'll talk about when to expect the next class as well in PoE 2. First, let's talk about Act 4 and the interludes. The Third Edict is headlined by the addition of Act 4, which introduces the Polynesian-inspired Gamakunu Archipelago, which is filled with new locations and bosses to encounter. And Archipelago is made up of 8 islands, and the act will be non-linear, allowing players to visit the islands in any order in search of a way to put a stop to the corruption threatening raid class. Act 4, however, is just a start. In an effort to make repeated playthroughs less of a chore, GGG is removing the game's cruel difficulty, which, if you didn't know, saw players play through Acts 1 through 3 a second time in order to reach the end game. So instead, it replaced that with 3 temporary acts it is calling interludes. These smaller, bite-sized acts serve as elaborate side quests that offer a new, less repetitive way to level up a character to endgame, without having to repeat the same content many players have already played through multiple times as part of early access. The interludes include 19 new areas and 9 new bosses. Interlude 1 will see players return to Hongkong in Act 1 to aid Renly. And Interlude 2, players will meet up with Asala in the Vastiri Desert. Lastly, in Interlude 3, players will join Doriani to find a group of lost Veil descendants. It should be noted that while aspects of the interludes, like new bosses, will be absorbed into Path of Exile 2's endgame, the acts themselves are temporary and will be removed with the addition of Act 5 at some point in the game's future. One huge gameplay change coming alongside the Third Edict is the ability for all characters to sprint. After a dodge roll, players can hold down a dodge button to break into a sprint, dramatically increasing their movement speed. Taking damage while in this state will cause players to be stunned temporarily, leaving them vulnerable to monsters. It's a big change, and one that Ryder said he was at first hesitant about. He worried that the ability to essentially outrun monsters would make combat feel optional, something that could pose problems for the game long term, which is understandable. Over time, though, he said he came to realize that for those who have mastery of the game or knew what they were doing, the ability to sprint would dramatically increase the speed at which they could go through the campaign and reach the endgame, which then in turn improves replayability. For players who don't have that level of mastery, simply sprinting through every encounter isn't a good idea, as doing so will mean missing out on XP and result in underleveled characters that will likely struggle to clear later content. Jonathan Rogers says, I just came to terms with the fact that it's okay for people who have played through many times to be able to get that kind of level of speed. The other thing it does do, of course, is it gives you the ability to retreat if you want to, which is good for new players as well if they're getting overwhelmed. In case a new act and interlude acts weren't enough, GGG will also kick off Path of Exile 2's first league as part of the Third Edict, called Rise of the Abyssal. The league is actually a sequel to one from the original Path of Exile. Over the course of Path of Exile 2's campaign, and endgame of course, players during Rise of the Abyssal will encounter fissure-spewing monsters. Slaying them and shutting the fissures will net players new rewards, including the ability to add new affixes to items, and NATs, possibly characters themselves. Another massive part of the Third Edict are sweeping buffs to everything from various class skills to the entire support gem system itself. Whereas Path of Exile 2's first major early access update, Dawn of the Hunt, upset many in the game's community with a lack of solutions to player complaints and unpopular nerfs, which things GGG quickly did look at and address in subsequent hotfixes. The Third Edict instead looks to give players more power in the form of expanded build options and buffs for underused skills. One big way players will be empowered is through a core change to support gems. Whereas players previously could only slot one of each support gem into their skills, Support gems can now be placed in as many skills as a player wants, vastly widening build diversity and options. A new type of support gem, lineage supports, are also being added. These extra powerful support gems are extremely rare and can drop from specific bosses, with 40 of them to discover in total. When asked if all the buffs, gem changes, and the addition of things like sprint might increase the speed and feel of Path of Exile 2's combat, which has been praised for its slower, more deliberate combat compared to other ARPGs, Rogers said that wasn't the goal. What we're trying to do here is lift the stuff that's not working and not increase the stuff at the top end, especially through the campaign. What we're trying to do really here is make sure that through the campaign, you don't get to the point where it becomes absurd too early. The buffs are part of the way GG is looking to address player feedback that Rogers said he hadn't been treated with the importance it deserved with the Dawn of the Hunt update. During development of the third edict, Rogers said it was very clear what the game's community was unhappy about, and the update looks to tackle them all head on. The third edict is PoE 2's second major update. There's still a ways to go before the game is ready to release in full and go free to play. Rogers said in an interview earlier this year he hoped PoE 2 would be ready to leave early access before the end of 2025. That is no longer the case. Yeah, so this is some sad news in terms of just the full release of the game. And this is a quote from Rogers where he says, "I definitely don't believe that's possible anymore. Things have taken a bit longer than we'd hoped. Ultimately, there's two things that need to happen before we can leave early access. One of them is that we obviously need to finish the campaign. I don't think that will take too much longer, but the other one is we have to get to the point of balance where everyone is actually happy with how things are. The general opinion needs to be that we've actually got it locked in. Obviously, we can't go into full release until we sort that out. Once those two things are true, then we'll release." There's also the fact that there are still 5 classes yet to be added to Path of Exile 2 as well, right? One nearly made it into the third edict, Roger said, but ultimately didn't make the cut, which is the Druid. So I remember watching an interview and reading about this too, where they at one point were trying to get the Druid in there along with this update, but the reason why it's not in there is it's taking longer because there's so many animation work they got to do basically with the Druid and how the Druid class itself interacts with the world, enemies, bosses, etc. But Rogers does confirm the Druid will be in the next major update. And keep in mind, these updates are every few months. And it's wild to think that all the while GGG is still developing new content for the original Path of Exile. Something Rogers admitted the studio struggled to balance earlier in the year when it put an update for Path of Exile on hold in the wake of PoE 2's launch. At the time, he said the team still had a lot to learn about running 2 games simultaneously. But now it seems like they're just back in the groove of things, where they got their team for Path of Exile 1 and they got their team for Path of Exile 2. But in terms of details, with all new content we're getting, well, all the above barely scratches the surface of the update. The endgame is receiving 25 new maps filled with new monsters and bosses, including Uber versions of bosses from Act 4. The third edict will even add asynchronous trade for the first time, allowing players to purchase items from each other without the need for the seller to be online. A system that, if goes well, will also be added to the first Path of Exile. Path of Exile 2 is currently available on Xbox Series XS, PlayStation 5, and PC, and those wanting to play during early access will need to buy an early access supporter pack, though the game will become free to play upon leaving early access, but we don't know exactly when that's going to happen yet because it's going to take them a lot longer to release it in full release. So with all these updates and changes that need to be added to the game. But the third edict major update does come August 29th, and they are having a free to play like open weekend for the game when this does drop. So that way players, that don't own the game can try it out, see how they like it. And if they decide to purchase it, they can do so after the, free play period is, expired basically. But the cool thing is though, your progress made during that free play weekend is carried over to the full game. So that's all I got for you in this video as I try to break down the major updates from their big hour-long reveal, which is insane how long it was. But yeah, very cool stuff here. Very much excited to see how all these systems make the game better, how classes are going to play differently and play better. Really see how the build variety is going to be even more expanded now that all these things are being added in here and retooled and rebalanced. So definitely cool stuff here. Let me know your thoughts on this, guys. Sound off in the comments below. What do you think about this? Does this make you want to jump back in after taking a break, or maybe even pick it up for the first time? Like I said, there is going to be a free like open weekend where you can play for free, don't have to pay, and that is going to last from August 29th to September 1st. So you'll have some chance to play it, see how you feel about it. If you enjoyed this video and learned something, I would appreciate a thumbs up. Subscribe if you're new. I'll see you guys in the next video.